You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron and to another edition of NFL Predictions as we predict our games for Super Wild Card Weekend. We got 6 games on tap, 2 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday. We got a Monday Night Football game. There's a game on Peacock. We have plenty to discuss, so make sure you dive into those comments. Let me know. Who do you think is winning? Why are they going to win? What are your thoughts on my predictions? Do you have some bets you're going for? I don't make bets. I don't give betting advice, but I'm always curious to see what you all are looking for. And we will start with that very first game on Saturday as the Cleveland Browns are hosted by the Houston Texans. The Browns coming into this game 3-5 on the road. They have struggled going into other people's houses and trying to get wins. Meanwhile, the Texans, it's been kind of their bread and butter playing in Houston. They are 6-3 at home, so I definitely think that is worth mentioning right off the bat. We have the NFL's best passing defense taking on one of the best run defenses in the NFL as the Houston Texans are number 6th in the league. My first question for this game, because it is going to be a big factor to keep an eye on, is the presence of CJ Stroud and if he's going to be able to dissect this Cleveland Browns passing defense. The first time these two teams played back in Week 16, CJ Stroud was not available for them, and I definitely think it hindered the Texans' ability to really play that game to their fullest potential and really bring it to the Browns, so I think that is definitely going to be worth watching here. Now, here's the deal. I do have a question for Houston, and that's going to be what has been somewhat of a merging pass rush and passing defense altogether, and if they're able to slow down this red-hot hand of Joe Flacco. Flacco threw for 368 yards and 3 touchdowns the first time these two teams met. He did have a couple of interceptions, but ultimately 368 yards, 3 touchdowns is not going to be a recipe for a victory for that Texans defense. They're going to need to get the pressure on Flacco and bring him down because they only got 1 sack the first time these two teams played, and I don't think only 1 sack will be enough for the Texans to potentially steal a victory here. So I will be focusing heavily on both these quarterbacks in this game because I really think they ultimately dictate how this game plays out. Another thing to keep an eye on is going to be that turnover battle. First time these two teams played, both teams finished the game with 2 turnovers apiece back in Week 16. I do think that is going to be something that could potentially dictate this game here. The Cleveland Browns can be prone to some mistakes on offense. Meanwhile, the Texans, they're pretty good at protecting the football, and defensively as of late, they've been having a nose for the football and making some takeaways happen there. So I do think ultimately whoever wins that turnover battle could potentially come away with this playoff win. Both teams have had some limited participants in practice all week, but they all look pretty healthy for the most part going into this matchup here, which is always a good thing to see. The healthier teams are, the more fun the game's going to be for us, the viewers. And as for who I think is going to win here, this is a tough call because I do think these teams match up really, really well, and I'm excited to see CJ Stroud face the Browns this time around because that was one of those things that we missed out on, obviously, the first time. I think he could potentially be a difference maker for the Houston Texans, keeping the game a lot closer, not allowing the game to get out of hand and not giving the Browns more opportunities on offense than they need. So I think I'm going to take Houston. I have them winning 23-21. The other thing that I always think about is it's very difficult to beat a team more than once in a season whenever you play them. Just because you beat them the first time does not necessarily guarantee you're going to beat them a second time. Beating teams 2 or 3 times is always a lot harder in a season. And something tells me in Houston, the Texans have a chance to make a shot. So this will be my first upset pick of the week. I like the Texans for a big victory. Next, we'll look at the other Saturday game, the Peacock Special, the one that a lot of people seem to be conspiracizing that is kind of the NFL's way to get Peacock some subscriptions rather, by getting the Swifties to sign up and tune in to watch their girl Taylor Swift cheer on Travis Kelce and the Kansas City Chiefs. Whether that's the case or not, obviously, I don't know, but I do think that is a interesting point to be made. As for this actual game here, I do think that with both of these teams in kind of the states they are in right now, and in some uglier spots, the Dolphins have struggled to beat some of the better teams in the NFL that they've played this season. Meanwhile, the Chiefs offensively have just not been the Chiefs of of old, of what we've been used to since Patrick Mahomes took over for the team over there. The Dolphins' number 1 passing attack is going to be tested once again against the Chiefs' number 4 ranked passing defense. The first time these two teams played together, the Chiefs allowed only 175 yards through the air in that meeting en route to a victory over the Dolphins. So that is definitely something that's worth noting. And when you look at some of the better passing defenses that this Miami Dolphins team has played, they have struggled a bit. He had 167 yards against the Bills just last week. He had only 221 yards versus the Ravens. He only had 213 yards versus the Jets, who, again, the Jets haven't been great this season, but their passing defense was a pretty formidable unit despite all the struggles that team endured this season. So I do think it's worth pointing out that, yes, this Miami offense has been great when throwing the football, but they have struggled against some of those better passing defenses in the league. As for the Chiefs, I think the biggest thing for them is it's a very simple and kind of like elephant in the room type of answer. Don't turn the football over. They have struggled with turnovers this season. I believe they have 28 on the year, if I'm not mistaken, something along those lines. They have a large number, 9th most in the NFL. So protecting the football will be key. That goes with Patrick Mahomes or anyone else that's catching the football or receiving the football from him on their end. No fumbles, no picks, no mistakes. You've got to play clean, sound football. And if they do, I think the Chiefs still have a really good chance of winning this football game. For all of their struggles, they can move the football a lot. It's just they find themselves in a position where they're inside their opponent's territory, and then they're just giving the football away. I do think health could also be a bit of a factor in this game here as well. The Chiefs come in as a relatively healthy unit. They do have some guys on the injury report, but not anything like super serious or anything that makes me worry about their starting units on both sides of the football. But when you look at the Miami Dolphins, you look at some of the injuries that they've been dealt with over the last month and a half, and you've got to have some serious concerns. Xavier Howard is currently listed as doubtful. Javon Holland has missed the last 2 practices this week. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Devon Achane are both listed as questionables as well. And then on top of that, Bradley Chubb got put on the IR a couple weeks ago. You lost Jalen Phillips a few weeks before that. They lost Connor Williams earlier in the season. This is a vastly different team from the first time around that these two teams played each other, and it's not for a good reason for the Miami Dolphins. And so I do think health is something that could play a factor. It's also going to potentially be under 0 degrees in this matchup, and that is another thing that I think is worth mentioning here. It feels like teams down south always struggle going into this cold weather stuff when it comes playoff time, and that worries me a little bit about the Miami Dolphins. Health, weather, and just a struggle against some of the elite passing defenses in the NFL has me leaning to the Chiefs on this one here. I'm going to take them 20-17. I think we get a lower scoring affair. That frigid cold going to keep the game a little bit lower. Hands are going to hurt a little bit more when that football's hitting you. All that, I think, does come into effect and maybe alters the scoreline to be a little bit lower in this matchup being as cold as it is. So give me the Chiefs. I have them winning 20-17 to wrap up Saturday Night Football. Now, moving into Sunday's matchups, we got 3 games on tap here, starting at 1 p.m. with the Pittsburgh Steelers being hosted by the Buffalo Bills. The Steelers, bit of road warriors this season. They're 5-3 on the road. They have found success in other people's homes, but Buffalo has been a force in Buffalo, sitting at 7-2. First question I have when I look at this matchup, of course, is Mason Rudolph. Is he going to be able to stand up strong against a stingy Buffalo Bills defense that has been very good this season? They're 7th against the pass, 15th against the run, but overall, they're 4th in points allowed per game. This is a tough unit to move against and a tough unit to score against. When it comes to Pittsburgh, I do think that for them, defensively, they've got to be opportunistic. They're also potentially going to be without TJ Watt in this matchup here, so you've got to take every opportunity that this mistake-prone Buffalo Bills defense can give you. Any opportunity that comes your way, you must come up with it. That means I don't want to be seeing defensive backs dropping an interception that comes straight to them, or maybe a fumble that gets recovered by the offense. If that ball is put into a dangerous spot, Pittsburgh must come away with it. This is a team, again, in Buffalo that has struggled to protect the football. They have 28 turnovers on the season. The Steelers defense has 27 takeaways themselves this season. Be opportunistic and steal a possession or 2 away. Look for both of these teams to run the football and honestly run it often because of the way this game matches up here. Again, going to be another one of those cold weather games here. We're looking at a 15th ranked run defense in the Buffalo Bills going up against a 19th ranked Pittsburgh run defense here. Both teams have found some success running the football themselves, so I do think that we could see some more runs, especially on the Buffalo Bills side. They've got to be balanced at this point in the season. I think if they lean on James Cook and just the hot hand that he's been working with lately, I think that we could potentially see both teams rushing for more than 100 yards in this matchup here if all goes well in their favor. As for who I think is going to win, the absence of TJ Watt is really scaring me. On top of that, I just, as much as I've been enjoying, I guess I should say, watching Mason Rudolph kind of light it up the last few weeks here, was a little bit of a down game against the Ravens, albeit the weather was not great. So, we'll call that one a wash, I guess you could say. But this is a Bills defense that is one of the best in the NFL and has been for the last number of years. I don't know if I can take Steelers over Buffalo in this one. Even though Pittsburgh has had some weird games and upsets over Buffalo in the past, I'll take the Bills 28-20. The next matchup that we're going to be looking at is going to be the Green Bay Packers being hosted by the Dallas Cowboys. As the Packers come in 4-5 on the road, being hosted by a Cowboys team that is 8-0 when playing in AT&T Stadium. So the Packers looking to end that undefeated run of the Cowboys this season. Dallas comes into this game leading the league in scoring. They're 5th in yards, and that could be a problem for a Green Bay Packers defense that has shown to be leaky, especially as of late from like weeks 11 to 16. They did tighten up the last couple of weeks of the season. Whether you want to put that blame on that to their opponents and just maybe some of the offensive struggles they've had, or if it really is the defense figuring itself out, I'll leave that up to you. But I mean, I have heard the calls for defensive coordinator Joe Barry to be fired this season, so whatever you want to take away from that, I'll let you kind of decide, but it is something that I think is worth mentioning here. For Green Bay, I do really think that they want to focus on running the football here. When Aaron Jones is getting the football and he's healthy, I think it really opens things up for this offense and what they can do. And thankfully, the Cowboys, against the run, they're about average at best, maybe slightly, and I emphasize the slightly above average on good days, but they rank 16th in the NFL against the run, having recently allowed up to 266 yards against Buffalo a few weeks back. So I do think a focus on running the football is something that the Green Bay Packers should be interested in highlighting in this matchup here. And I definitely think you could kind of say the same for Dallas here. Throwing has obviously been the bread and butter for the Dallas Cowboys this season, but Tony Pollard can run the football. He's a 1,000-yard rusher this season. And Green Bay ranks 28th against the run. Their defense has been a sand sieve when trying to defend against running backs this season. They've allowed 200-plus yards in 4 different games this season. So they've had some good little stretch recently, keeping their opponents under 100 yards in the last 4 games or so, which is a good sign that maybe they found some ways to improve that run D a little bit and tighten things up. But their track record throughout the entire season has not been good and is definitely something to keep an eye on here. Third down is also something that I think is going to be a huge deciding factor in this game here. You look at both of these defenses, and you're going to basically ask them to go up against 2 of the best third down offenses in the NFL. When you look at these 2 teams, they love to convert on third down, so whoever can make the big stop in key situations, I think is going to be able to move the table in their favor. And for me personally, I think that the Dallas Cowboys just have a little bit more in the tank and are more than likely going to be the team that gets this one done. I know a lot of people are probably sitting there holding their breath on a Dallas Cowboys first-round exit. I think maybe they get the job done this week, and then we can all look towards maybe a Cowboys bouncing next week. But in my personal opinion, when it comes to Dallas, in Dallas, they have just been a very impressive team. And the way these 2 teams kind of stack up in their current states, I look at the Green Bay Packers as a team that's kind of playing with house money right now, whereas the Cowboys are in here for a good reason. Yes, they maybe have a troubling track record against teams with winning records this season, but overall, I do think the Cowboys are the better team, so I'm going to lean with Dallas 27-20, good victory at home, getting the job done, moving into the divisional round next weekend. Next, we have what is a very highly anticipated contest for myself, and I know Lions and Stafford fans and Rams fans are all looking forward to this one here. I'm sure the NFL was really invested in hoping to see this matchup happen as well, as we have the Lions hosting the Rams in a revenge game as Matthew Stafford comes to Detroit chasing ring number 2 now. And listen, I personally believe that we are going to get some fireworks in this matchup here, and there's a few reasons as to why. The first thing, we got a bit of a marquee matchup in this one here. Kyren Williams is a top 5 rusher this year. He missed a handful of games during the season, but if he doesn't miss time, he ends up potentially being maybe even the leading rusher in the NFL. He exploded on the scene this season and has just been unbelievable with the football in his hands. He's going up against a number 2 ranked run defense in Detroit, and I think they're going to have their hands full. And I'll be very curious to see just how stout this Lions run defense is against somebody as electric as Kyren Williams. And if he gets going, the passing game starts to open up. Matthew Stafford and the Rams can make you pay. We have 2 of the best red zone offenses in the league, both being in the top 5. They're both top 10 scoring offenses as well. And these defenses can struggle against the pass. Both of them do. Rams are ranked only 20th. That puts them in the bottom third of the NFL. Lions are ranked 27th. That puts them in the bottom 5. This is a really good opportunity for a lot of scoring. And again, I know I'm not a bettor. I don't give betting advice, but for those of you that like the over, this feels like a game that could be heading that direction here. This truly feels like one of those games, in my opinion, that winds up being one of those like whoever has the ball last type of affairs winds up winning the game. I could see something along those lines happening where the ball's just getting out too quick for the pass rushes and offenses are moving through the air at a very high clip. As for who I think comes out victorious in this, though, for me personally, maybe I'm getting a little bit biased over on this one here because I am a big Matthew Stafford fan, but I think the Rams could come in and make an upset. This is a bit of a homecoming game for Matthew Stafford. Yes, it's an away game for him, but it's almost a home game for him as well. He called Detroit home for many years, and Lions fans, I know you're appreciative of all the work that Matthew Stafford did in Detroit. Vastly underappreciated. In my opinion, he has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL for a very long time and was not getting the credit he deserves, and I'm glad he was able to get a ring elsewhere and be able to solidify himself in the upper echelons of quarterbacking in the NFL. But something tells me Matthew Stafford comes out with a win in his return to Ford Field. So I'll take the Rams 31-28, high-scoring affair, a lot of drama. I'm sorry, Lions fans. I'm just feeling that Stafford and the Rams might be the dark horse that people need to look out for. And then finally, to wrap this one up here, much shorter than usual. It's weird doing only 6 games here after doing what feels like 16 games a week for the last 5. We have ourselves some Monday Night Football playoff action as the Philadelphia Eagles are hosted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Eagles finishing the season with a 1-5 record. Meanwhile, Tampa Bay 9-8, only 9 points over their division rival Carolina Panthers last week. You could argue that both these teams, and even the week prior, they did not look good against the New Orleans Saints. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Philadelphia Eagles kind of limped their way into the playoffs here. So they both, in my opinion, could not have pulled a better potential opponent for them, all struggles considered from both sides. I think it's a very winnable game for both of these teams. When you look at the Philadelphia Eagles and some of their struggles, 100 yards rushing or more since week 9. No less than 100. On top of that, when you look at the Bucs, not the best at running the football, but as of late, they have found some better success. I would say in the last 7 weeks, 8 weeks or so, they've been better running the football than the first half of the season. So if there's an opportunity to maybe take advantage of that, this would be a game to do so. Keep an eye on the Bucs and trying to run the football here, because if they can run effectively, I do think it can really open things up for their passing attack, which at times can be very deadly and effective considering the talent they have at wide receiver. I also think it's worth pointing out, since that same time frame, the bye week, the Eagles have been allowing 29 points per game. On top of that, they have 12 offensive turnovers since week 14. There is a lot of noise about what's going on in that locker room and this collapse that the Eagles are going through this season. It has not been pretty, and I'm very concerned. Thankfully, for the Eagles' sake, they're at least going against the Buccaneers. They struggle against the pass, maybe opens things up for them. They're a very formidable unit, though, against the run, so this Eagles run game will be tested against the 5th-ranked run defense of the Buccaneers this season. I really think that this is anyone's ball game. It really is, because like I said, both of these teams kind of have their flaws, and I know I've kind of maybe ragged on the Eagles a little bit more than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but I mean, even to point out the Buccaneers, their offense can be so inconsistent week to week. They can be putting up 30-some-odd points one week, or they're putting up 9 or a goose egg in the following weeks. Like, they are such a hot and cold unit, and I feel like if they can't stay on the same page and be on schedule, they could be being bounced by the Eagles in round number 1 at home. But when you look at the Eagles and just the turmoil that's going on over there with all the things that I have heard regarding the stuff in the locker room and everything, and just seeing the product of the Philadelphia Eagles on the field this last 6 weeks, I don't think anyone from either side is going into this game supremely confident that their team is for a fact going to come out victorious in here. Honestly, if you're going to say that, I think you're lying, to be completely honest. I just don't think anyone is walking out of this game, or walking into this game rather, a clear favorite. Not in the slightest. Like, maybe you could say the Eagles because they have a better record, but not as of the last 6 weeks, that's for sure. The Bucs at least have a few more wins than they do. So this is definitely a tight one and a tough one for me. But what is really scaring me is just the rumored turmoil surrounding the Eagles locker room, and maybe Nick Sirianni potentially having lost the locker room. I don't know the ins and outs of it completely and all the details, but having stuff like that come out, combined with a 1-5 record in the last 6 games here, coupled with just the poor play, both offensively and defensively in some areas, something is going on in Philadelphia. Whereas like the Buccaneers, it's just a matter of like inconsistent play. But something not good is brewing in Philadelphia, and it has me concerned. So with that, I think I'm going to take the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think it's going to be a tight one. I don't think it's going to be a pretty win. I think it's going to be one of those where the Eagles, I could see it getting chippy late in the game. With everything considered and just where these teams are, I could see a lot of emotion coming out of this one here, especially some potential injuries on the Eagles side. It's just hard for me to really side with them here. And I want to, believe me, I do. Them having the better record, being favored by the bettors and everything like that, it feels like the Eagles could get the job done here. But there is just a lot in the back of my mind telling me to stay away from Philadelphia. So I'm going to take the Buccaneers. I have them winning a very low scoring affair. I don't think there's going to be a lot of points in this one. I have them winning 21-14. Not a lot. It's going to be a lower scoring, uglier offensive affair. I think the defenses maybe win out a little bit in here, but ultimately I could see maybe some offensive inconsistencies slowing the Bucs down a bit, leading to them only getting about 21 on the board. That's kind of how I look at the matchup here. So give me the Bucs, 21-14, tight contest, not a pretty one offensively by any means, and I could definitely see some tempers flaring in this one. But those are my picks going into Super Wild Card Weekend. As always, I invite you to comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your picks, your predictions, the bets you're placing this week. I'd love to discuss with you all, share my opinions on them. But that's it for me as always. I greatly appreciate it if you made it to the end. I will see you all next time. Have a good one.